OpenAI just built an AI so capable that before they let the public anywhere near it, they handed it to the United States government first. And the government said, not so fast. This is not a normal product launch. On the 26th of June, 2026, OpenAI announced a new family of models called GPT-5.6. And instead of the usual confetti, demo videos, and Precedent available to everyone today energy, what we got was a limited preview locked to roughly 20 organizations where access is approved by the U.S. government on a customer-by-customer basis. Let me say that again, because it's the whole story. A commercial AI release is now being gated, customer by customer, by the federal government. This is not a model you can sign up for. It's not generally available. It's a gated preview, and the gatekeeper is Washington. So let's unpack exactly what was built, who pumped the brakes, and the honest question underneath all of it. Is this genuine safety, or is it a moat? First, what actually launched? GPT 5.6 isn't one model, it's three, and OpenAI gave them names: Sol, Terra, and Luna. Sol is the top tier, the heavy hitter built for the hardest problems, things like complex coding and security research. It's priced at $5 per million input tokens and $30 per million output tokens. Terra sits in the middle, aimed at high-volume business work, customer support, internal tools, document analysis. And here is the interesting part. Terra is priced at $2.50 and $15, which is exactly half the price of the previous generation, GPT 5.5, for comparable work. So the workhorse tier got twice as cheap. That matters more than it sounds, because the middle tier is where most real business spending actually happens, the high-volume, unglamorous work. And there's Luna, the fast, low-cost, everyday option for summarizing, drafting, and routine automation at $1 and $6. Here is also a secondary report, and I'll flag this as reportedly of a 1.5 million token context window, which, if it holds up, means you could feed one of these models an enormous amount of material at once, entire code bases, long legal documents, whole books in a single shot. Now here's where Sol gets genuinely interesting, and where you start to understand why people got nervous. Sol has two new modes the other models don't. The first is called Max Reasoning Effort. Basically, you let Sol take more time to think deeply before it answers, trading speed for depth. You'd reach for it on the gnarly problems where a fast, shallow answer is worse than a slow, correct one. The second mode is the one that raises eyebrows, Ultra Mode. Instead of a single AI agent grinding through a problem step by step, Ultra coordinates multiple sub-agents working in parallel, splitting up complex multi-step work between them. Think of it less like one very smart assistant and more like a small team of them dividing and conquering. That parallel agent capability is a real jump in how much autonomous work this thing can chew through in one go, and it's exactly the kind of capability that makes regulators sit up straight. Because a model that can coordinate a swarm of sub-agents on a hard multi-step task is by definition a model that can do more on its own with less human checking each step. So let's get to the headline, the government story. According to OpenAI's own post and multiple major outlets, VentureBeat, CNN, Engadget, Axios, and the Decoder, OpenAI didn't just quietly release this. Before any broad rollout, the company shared the models and its release plans with the U.S. government, and the government leaned in. Two offices in particular, the Office of the National Cyber Director and the Office of Science and Technology Policy, pushed for a phased release rather than a wide-open launch. It reportedly went all the way up to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who called OpenAI directly to warn them against proceeding without broader agency sign-off. The result is what we have now, a limited preview, roughly 20 organizations, and federal approval on a customer-by-customer basis. A broader general release is only hoped for a couple of weeks later, in the coming weeks. So if you're sitting there wanting to try Sol, the honest answer is you probably can't. And whether you ever get to may not be up to OpenAI alone. And Sam Altman himself notably did not sound thrilled about the precedent. His direct quote, "We've made clear to the U.S. government that this is not our preferred long-term model, and will work with them and others in industry to achieve a more sustainable approach for future releases." Read that carefully. The CEO of OpenAI is publicly saying this gated, government-approved rollout is not how he wants to do this going forward. And that's a remarkable thing for a CEO to say on launch day. Essentially, we shipped it this way, but we don't love it. That tension between a company that wants to ship and a government that wants a brake pedal is the real story of this launch, and it's not going away after the press cycle. Why now? Because T here is a precedent, and it's a big one, reportedly. According to the Decoder, this isn't the first time. Back in April 2026, Anthropic, OpenAI's biggest rival, presented a model called Mythos, and then the U.S. government reportedly forced Anthropic to pull its Claude Fable 5 model offline. That episode, the government effectively pulling a frontier model, is described as establishing the regulatory precedent that shaped these GPT-5.6 restrictions. So when OpenAI handed Sol to the government first, they weren't acting in a vacuum. They were reading the room after a competitor's model had already been pulled. Once that happens, every lab has to assume it can happen to them, and you start to design your release plan around the regulator from day one. That's a quiet but enormous shift in how frontier AI gets shipped. OpenAI's framing for all of this is safety. They say GPT-5.6 Sol launches with their most robust safety stack to date, with strengthened protections around higher risk activity, sensitive cyber requests, and repeated misuse. And to be fair, the capability profile here, autonomous subagents, security research, a model competitive at finding software exploits, is exactly the category where you'd want guardrails before you hand it to millions of anonymous users. I'm not going to dismiss that. A phased rollout to a small number of vetted organizations with extra protections on the riskiest requests is a defensible thing to do with a tool this capable. But hold that thought, because there's a second reading, and it's worth taking seriously too. Let's talk performance. Carefully, because the numbers matter, and so does where they come from. On OpenAI's self-reported Terminal Bench 2.1 results, and I want to stress, these are OpenAI's own numbers. Independent verification is still pending. Sol in Ultra Mode scores 91.9%. Plain Sol scores 88.8. Claude Mythos 5 sits at 88.0. Terra lands at 84.3, which exactly ties Claude Fable 5, also at 84.3. So on OpenAI's own benchmark, Sol narrowly tops Claude Mythos 5, and the mid-tier Terra matches Fable 5. Notice how narrow that gap at the top is. 88.8 versus 88.0 is less than a single point on a test the winner picked. OpenAI also reports efficiency wins on a biology benchmark called GeneBench. Sol beats the older GPT 5.5 while using fewer tokens. And on a cybersecurity benchmark, ExploitBench, Sol is competitive with Claude Mythos while using roughly a third of the output tokens. If those hold up independently, the efficiency story, same or better results for a fraction of the compute, is arguably more impressive than the raw scores, because efficiency is what actually shows up on your bill. But here's the honest part, the part that keeps this from being a press release. Those are vendor-reported numbers on the vendor's chosen benchmark on several independent public benchmarks measured before Sol arrived. Claude Fable 5 has actually led, scoring around 80.3% on SWE Bench Pro, nearly 90 on Live Code Bench, and 59% on Humanity's Last Exam. Fable 5 is also priced as a premium model, $10 and $50 per million tokens, plug-in anti-table price of Sol. So who's actually winning? The truthful answer: it depends on the benchmark, and it depends on who's even allowed to use it. Sol edges Fable 5 on OpenAI's own terminal bench. Fable 5 still leads several independent coding benchmarks. And here is the kicker. Most people literally cannot access Sol right now. A model you can't run isn't beating anything in the real world yet. The leaderboard and the login screen are telling two different stories. Which brings us back to the question I promised: safety or moat? Here's my take. The safety concerns are real parallel autonomous agents that are good at cyber and security research, are genuinely a different risk category, and a phased rollout is a defensible response to that. I'm not in the camp that says this is pure theater, but notice what government gating also does. It hands a small group of approved organizations early exclusive access to a frontier tool. It builds a relationship between a private company and federal regulators that competitors now have to navigate too. And it lets a company turn a constraint into a marketing line. Our model is so powerful the government got involved is, let's be honest, an incredible flex. And you're hearing it work on you right now. When safety and competitive advantage point in the exact same direction, you don't have to assume bad faith, but you should at least ask which one is steering. The thing I'd watch isn't this one launch, it's whether this becomes the template. If frontier AI releases increasingly route through federal sign-off customer by customer, then who gets to build at the cutting edge stops being a purely commercial question and becomes a political one. Think about what that means. The next frontier model might be gated not because of its price or its quality, but because of who an agency decides is allowed to touch it. Altman is already signaling he doesn't want that to be permanent. The government clearly has other ideas. And right now, GPT-5.6 Sol is the test case sitting right in the middle of that fight. Gated, government approved, and not generally available to you or me. So keep your eye on those coming weeks. Whether this opens up smoothly or whether customer by customer approval quietly becomes the new normal will tell us a lot about who's really in charge of frontier AI, the companies building it, or the government deciding who gets to use it. Stay curious. This is AI Unpacked.